Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Men and Sex. I'm your host, Mr. Wood. Today, we have got a conversation that's going to have a lot of energy in it. And that's one thing that I don't talk a lot about here on the podcast is one of the main reasons I want more men to open up and talk about sexuality is to reclaim more of their personal power. And this man that I have on the episode today is very familiar with personal power. First, I want to share the story of how I came to know Kevin Walton, aka Source Radiance. I know Source from the organization Sacred Sons, and I went to my first event here in my backyard in Washington State. I woke up the first morning of the event. It was 400 people gathered from all over the world. I got up at like 6 a.m. and I hear all this noise down at the beach of people yelling things and saying things. And I was like, what's going on down here? Are they cold plunging? What are they doing? And I found Kevin, who I just met down on the beach there, and he was leading people through a morning activation as the sun was rising right on the beach. And needless to say, I started joining every morning to do the morning activation and get in the cold plunge. And we'll talk a little bit more about the morning activation here. And it's something that I continue to do, which is a variety of breath work, saying different mantras, and just really pumping ourselves full of energy to start the day. So, welcome to the show, Source Radiance. Pleasure to have you.
It's an honor, brother. Thank you for having me. Thank you for hearing that call at 2 in the morning and coming to join us.
Yeah, I
Oh,
I I definitely wanted in on that, and that beach was a beautiful place for that.
it was. Yeah,
Hey,
very.
share with the audience just a little bit about you do many things. You're an actor, you have the light beings, you're in Sacred Sons. Just give us a little drop about who you are.
Oh man. Yeah, many things, many things. I foundationally, I would say I have this practice, right? This spiritual practice, life path, operating system I call creatorhood. And that's the foundation of my life. It's an organically developed practice that I've built over the years with this access and to just insights and connectivity to the infinite wisdom of creation and ways I started to explore where it lives out in the world. And so everything I do functions from that foundationally. And I started the Light Beings as a an opportunity to create a container for people to come explore everything that it meant to be them and what it meant to live life in a space without judgment, to really explore everything and to encourage everyone to live into the truth of themselves through these. And that's what led to developing the practices in that Light Beings container. And so now the Light Beings, we have it established as a community and ministry. And so I do community development, I do cultural development in companies and get hired to work with leadership and teams and athletes and individuals and couples and families and all of that, to just see people really grow and evolve into the truth of themselves and really live into everything they're designed to be. And that's like my main just dedication to life. And I work with everyone, right? Men, women, kids, all of it. And then I'm one of the leaders in Sacred Sons, so I do the work, men's work too. And we also do that in Light Beings containers. And I am an actor and a writer and director, and I got a production company, and I love all of that too. I just love the arts, and used to be an athlete. I mean, well, forever an athlete,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
used to actually play sports on a regular, and but I still keep that alive in me. I'm a father, right, brother, all of it. Yeah, there's a lot of things to do, and I just
Yeah,
like,
man.
yeah.
And one of my favorite things about you and why I'm excited to have you on the podcast is the amount of energy you have to create.
Mm, yeah.
And that's something that I think is an important process that each of us goes through as men to find our path, from whatever amount of muck we're in, through the muck to, oh, I'm a creator in this life. So I'm really excited to dive into this topic because that's what I'm passionate about, is that walking that bridge from,
Yeah.
man, I'm in the muck to, wow, I'm a creator.
Yeah.
And I think this subject, sexuality, is one of the most important subjects for men to dive into to
Very much
move
so.
out of that muck, across that bridge to I'm a creator. And I
Yeah.
want to share a little bit a story with you and the listeners that I think will be a good way to start of where we can start diving into some little pieces of information around shame and disempowerment and all the things that are keeping us kind of weak. So for me on my path that really led me to sexuality and talking about it with men was going to weekend events where men got to talk about sexuality and I kept hearing the phrase, I've never told this to anyone in my life. I've
Yeah.
never told this to anyone in my life. I've never told this to anyone in my life. And it was usually correlated to some amount of shame, which is like, I'm wrong, I'm bad, I'm broken, there's something wrong with me. So those two pieces kept popping up for me.
Mhm.
And then, I was seeing in men's work and men's communities, even in those spaces that are designed for men to go into all the muck, there was hardly any space to talk about sexuality.
Yeah.
And I realized, okay, there's the most muck here. There's a lot of feelings of I'm bad, I'm broken, and there seems to be some potency as far as reclaiming personal power here.
Yeah. 100%.
And then I saw the information from David R. Hawkins' work, who has the map of consciousness, scale of consciousness, and I saw shame as one of the weakest states a human being can be in. Once again,
Mhm.
shame, some belief system around I'm bad, I'm broken, I'm wrong, whatever. So I'd love to start there just in this idea of shame and the belief of something being wrong with me and how that correlates to us being weak or not being able to create from whatever comes up for your perspective there.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a great place to start, and a really important place to acknowledge. Uh, so the way I break down emotions and feeling states in the practice is you have it's not about right positive or negative. It's really about just understanding the energetic capacities and what they're telling us, right? So that we don't get caught up in some judgment that keeps us from actually feeling it and moving it. And so the way I break it down is you have six central emotional conduits and then very specific feeling states that live in each. And guilt is one of the, so you have, each one has a gateway in a mature form. And guilt is a gateway and love is the mature form of this particular conduit. So meaning that if I'm living in a mature state embodied, I'm living in the access to love as an emotional conduit. But if any part of me is playing out a limitation, some part of myself I'm not fully embraced, I'll filter that energy into whatever the corresponding thing is if it's being filtered. And so like, for example, you have willpower as the mature, anger as a gateway. Um, Gratitude, sadness, right? Like confidence, fear. And so it's not about peace, joy. It's not about like a right or wrong thing or positive or negative. It's just a recognition of what do we experience if we're not living fully embodied. So then in that particular place, in order for us to not be living in a love state, that means there has to be something we are judging about ourselves, something we're holding over ourselves that doesn't allow us to accept the fullness of us, which is a state of love, right? The absolute acceptance of everything. So shame, the way I break down is shame is one of the feeling states that lives inside of guilt, right? Embarrassment lives inside of guilt, shame lives inside of guilt, regret lives inside of guilt, unworthiness lives inside of guilt. And so when you speak to the notion of this wrongness, it's exactly where that lives, that there's somehow I've done something wrong and then it's internalized, right? Now, there is such a thing as being in violation of a code or out of integrity with one's being. And when we are, we could just as readily own that, address that, and move as much as we could dump truck on how fucked up we are to ourselves because we did that, right?
Right.
And and so the feeling state of shame is one of the indicators of that. It's okay, there's something that I've experienced that I find to be in violation to something, and that's what the energetic conduit of guilt tells us as an emotion, because emotions tell us something very specific in relation to our lived experience. And then we understand what version of us is inside of that playing it out. And so in this case, speaking to shame, when we've done certain things, made certain choices, experienced certain things we find to be a contradiction to the greater ideal to ourselves or how we think we're supposed to be or whatever thing we want to use as a reference point, and we recognize that violation and we don't address that properly, then we feel the shame of it. And it could even be something having an experience with someone else, because I see that happen, like say in when I work with women and we've had experiences of rape, and
Yeah.
they would speak to how much shame they felt, like how dirty they felt, like somehow they've been, you know what I mean, from that experience, because nothing about that is okay and ideal. So then there's that experience of this is a violation to some aspect of myself, and now I carry this, right? And so it's that notion, anywhere we have shame, it's we carry this idea of being, of having been removed from some capacity of that divine connectivity that we think that we have, that we think somehow we've now messed up. So being, and then what that does in terms of like you're talking about in a weak state, what happens when we don't accept ourselves fully is we're constricting the access to more of that power we are, right? And I love that we're speaking on the notion of sexuality, because when we talk about power being life force energy, like we are power, right? It's literally the essence of our existence, and it is seated by the sexual center of any being, because that is the connectivity of that embodiment of the being, right? The sexual foundation is the energetic foundation of any given thing. And so then if we live in greater connection to it, we live in greater connection to all that we are, more authentically embodied, every facet. If there's any part of us that we don't accept, we don't want to acknowledge, we don't feel, we've now created a fragmentation from the totality of that access. And now it's like, so like the hose of source pumping in all this life force is now getting constricted, almost like a vein or artery getting constricted, if it's all clogged up. And so then we're not functioning at our greatest capacity. So our ability to meet shame, our ability to meet these feeling states and acknowledge it and own it, and then take that energy and redirect it, is how we start to restore and live into that greater functioning. And so it's so important to be able to have the honest look at it, because like you're stating, when people say I haven't shared this with anyone, or what's fascinating when you really break down emotions, like I have this whole thing to this, I'm just really fascinated by it, is that every emotion carries a corresponding like impulsion and certain energetic activity and reactivity or responsiveness, depending on how you are with it, or how we are with it. And I noticed that when it comes to guilt as the emotional charge, one of the things it holds, because it's a violation, is the wanting to not look at ourselves, right? The avoidance of being like, no, I don't look at that. I don't want to speak on it. I don't want to look at it. I just want to hide it, right? It's one of the biggest indicators where guilt lives, and then whatever feeling state is inside of it. And so our ability to really sit down with ourselves and have to feel that pain and be with that discomfort gives us the opportunity to start to free that energy up. Then once we start that process and we come to terms with it, it gives us the opportunity to grab the energy and then build back into integrity, back into proper functioning in those ways. And so it's so important for how we function, and if we're not accepting ourselves fully, you can rest assured there's something we're living in the narrative of how wrong we are. So in this particular area, I don't deserve love. I don't deserve the acceptance, because this is a complete whatever to anything else. But it's not something to bury ourselves with. It is something to tell us where to clean that shit up in us, where to meet the truth of ourselves and not live in the narrative. You know what I mean? So it's a really, man, it's so invaluable. And I love that
there's one piece that, that stands out to me too, is that because sexuality is one of those topics, not only is it made taboo, and it's like, oh, don't talk about it. No, don't talk about it, avoid it, whatever. Beyond that, it is in some religions and some teachings, it's like, you are wrong. You are bad. If you do it this way, then you're evil. You'll be condemned. So one of the other things that I think is so potent is that we're facing, I'm speaking to men on this channel, but I think everyone, but as men, we're facing is in the collective consciousness, this story that is, unless you do it this prescribed way, you should feel guilt. You should feel wrong. And, I love that you brought that in, that guilt triggers the don't look reaction, because that's so much of what I see in the world of hearing men tell their stories. It's just like, oh, don't look at it. Don't look at it. But that's where the very fragmentation is, or like you said, the kink in the hose. Like the kink in the hose is there that's blocking the flow of my life force energy. To be a creator, I have to go towards it. I have to go into it to reclaim that power and, you know, find that full acceptance. And in order to find the full acceptance, I have to talk about it. I have to tell my story. I have to shine a light on it to its fullness, every little nook and cranny. If I don't shine a light on every nook and cranny, how will I have the full acceptance for the totality of myself?
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. And it's so key in that, when just like what you're talking about now, that notion of I don't know how to be with this, so I don't want anyone else to see it, right? And what it means to live in a full liberated state of I'm willing to face all of these things, to live in the full acceptance of me, to be my fullest authentic expression of self, which is the prime directive of life. You know what I mean? And in that dedication, it demands, we talk about what love demands of us is addressing these things that want to be met. Because there is no way to live in the totality of us without that. And and I love that you brought in that aspect of the predisposed judgment
Mm,
about something that is a natural part of existence that can be held in a far
yeah,
sacred way,
yeah,
right? Not to be frivolous with it, but to
yeah,
understand that there's beliefs that get established and we condition ourselves with that automatically elicit judgment and guilt around something that is actually a natural occurrence, that if we taught it from a greater understanding of
yeah,
what's happening in our bodies, what we
yeah,
feel in relation to this, how do we maneuver with attraction, what is that feeling when I feel more lustful than I do more in tune, what is the difference if I'm feeling the truth of desire rather than craving, what is, you know what I mean? And it just speaks to, no, if you do this and that and that and that, you're wrong. And then people have that feeling like, oh, this isn't okay, because no one's guided, they weren't being guided properly on what's actually happening and then what to do with it. You know what I mean? And so I love that. And anything, I always say that anything that teaches from fear
yeah,
or from divisiveness
yeah.
or from some disconnection to the self is not teaching from truth.
Mm,
So it's an important thing for us to be able to
ooh,
recover so that we come back to the truth of these things so we actually can have greater conversations around it. So it doesn't become taboo. It becomes, because what's funny is, especially in America, where it is taboo in so many ways and yet used to sell shit, right? And promote shit all the time. It's like, well, don't be all sexualized about it, but buy my product. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just wild. And so there's the understanding of just how powerful it is, but a misunderstanding of how to live in the sacredness of it properly so that it can be discussed in healthy, direct ways and also understood in how it can be approached and utilized instead of um, this or that, black and white,
yeah,
you know what I mean, you're wrong automatically for this thing. And especially when it's based on interpretation and constant modification from human opinion and not the foundational understanding of how the energetics work. You know,
yeah. I
it's
I
huge.
often think about, because also on this podcast, I just interview men anonymously and I hear their stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so much, of what I hear is the foundation is built upon secrecy and hiding
Yeah.
and not telling. So it's
Yeah.
like this lurking in the shadow, don't see me.
Yep.
And that energy, there's no way full acceptance could be there. Because if full acceptance would be there, we'd be out on the street corner going, "This is who I am. See
Yeah.
me as I see me in my totality. This is everything that
Yeah.
I am." And
Yeah.
so this is why I'm so passionate about this conversation and this education and mentorship, whatever it is to that foundation has to be rebuilt. And as you talk about so beautifully, and there's other things I'm going to go into later in the conversations, like that is the basis of channeling energy through this being
So
in such potent ways.
yeah.
And what's blowing my mind lately is understanding more and more that pleasure plays a potent role in survival. It's
Mhm.
not just some random thing that exists.
Yeah.
It tells
100%.
us in many ways, go towards this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Go towards this, go towards this. But ultimately, like you said, it's about mentorship, education of how do I
Yeah.
utilize this to be a
Exactly.
powerful creator in this world and not kink the hose there.
Yeah. And I love you because that's so the nuance of that is so paramount because the line is so thin.
Yes.
And it's also why when I teach, as you know, so I'm very precise with language and specificity so that we don't get caught up in the generalities that keep things murky. So like when someone, because I see this in certain spiritual communities a lot, where it's like if it doesn't feel good, does it feel bad? Just follow what feels good, and it's like, let's
Yeah,
slow down
yeah,
for a
yeah.
second, so right, because there's a lot of things that feel good for the moment that are not healthy for you whatsoever, right?
Totally.
And so having the education and the knowledge and the wisdom of how to understand the pleasure principle
Yes.
and what the pleasure and pain aspects of life are and what they indicate, and how to understand it properly for like the difference between the craving of gratification pleasure, which is always unhealthy,
Yeah.
which is it is never sustainable. It is literally always unhealthy. And then the recognition of being able to enjoy the process of the long-term fulfillment and sustainable state
Mm,
of pleasure in life,
mm,
right? That
mm.
then just gets enhanced through immediate experiences of like building something greater that demands us meeting edges and discomfort, but then through that living such a greater space of liberation that that state of pleasure sustains, right? The idea of being in a relational container and every day is a dedication to the love making, from the little playful things to the little check-ins to the little confrontations to meeting oneself, so that when it comes to the actual act of sexual intercourse, there's so much more energy dialed in. It's enriched because it's living in a greater sacredness of life.
Yeah.
And so to understand the difference is so important. Because when I think of like food's one of the greatest examples of this,
Yeah.
right? It's like, oh
Yeah.
my God, this thing, the flavor is so amazing. Then you finish, you're like, oh my God, I feel terrible. Why did I eat that? I just wanted to take, you know what I mean? It's like if you have this experience, that you'd rather have just that moment of gratification for the suffering that follows, rather than going, well, what would I want to actually experience that keeps my body feeling amazing constantly, that I also can enjoy. And suddenly now there's more information to work with. And so I love that you're stating that recognition of what pleasure offers us as a survival mechanism in physiology is important. And
Yeah.
then what it offers us in a conscious functioning of a society
Yeah.
is also amazing, with the proper understanding of what it is and how to move with it. And that's the fundamental key. And why one of the things I teach about is always about the difference between alignment and misalignment. Am I approaching this from alignment, proper considerations and understanding, or am I approaching it from misalignment and disregard or exploitation or manipulation of some sort, you know?
The this is just coming to me. I've thought about it in different ways before, but you talk about this razor's edge, the razor's edge that is pleasure and how it can be healthy and ultimately, I think that's what the teachings around the seven deadly sins were about. It's like these bring a lot of pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And if you
But you're
don't
not
have command of it,
yeah,
you're gonna go, whether it's,
exactly.
we look at, food, eating a bunch,
100%.
sex, we're just like getting high and, just lost in pleasure all the time. If I
Yeah.
look at each of those, it's very much that razor's edge of if I'm in command of it, I
Mm-hmm.
can live a healthy, long, sustained life,
Yep.
but I can easily lose myself to it. But I think how that teaching comes across to most people is avoid these things, don't
Exactly.
do them, which actually just creates like an
Yeah.
attraction to them to be lost in them more.
100%. Because I think that's probably one of the silliest ways of teaching people anything is these things aren't great, just don't do it. Right. Because I remember one time where I was when I was younger and was told like, just don't have sex. Right? If you're not ready for kids, don't have sex. And I was like, that is useless to me when I'm feeling all this energy alive in me and this attraction. I'll do. Oh yeah, well I'm not ready for kids. I'm gonna say I don't know what I'm fucking thinking about that. I don't understand what's happening in my body. This tingly, this insane. I love it. I want more of this. What happens when I kiss? Oh, what the fuck? Right? It's
Yeah.
like it's if we don't teach the greater understanding, so much gets lost in translation because when we're in it, if we don't have proper reference points of understanding how to maneuver in our awareness, we're just going to go with what's available. And that's created so much distortion in the world. And I love that you brought in that recognition, because when I think about like the sins, and I used to say widely, it's like, well, yeah, but sins aren't a real thing. And it's not until I understood really what it's speaking to is when you are not living from a centered, connected place to the greater principle of divine order, these things that are very potent and wildly enriching to your lived experience will become very degenerative
Yeah.
in life. And I recognize it's just about the whether I'm feeling connected to source and how I move or not. And that's how I break down the practice, the difference between desire and craving. Because I watch desire get thrown around
Yeah. Yeah.
loosely in all directions. And so in the practice, I break things down to have specific words as references so it doesn't get convoluted. And so the way I break down is desire is actually the healthy thing. It's when we feel the pull, the call from a full connected place to self,
Mm.
right? I feel this desire, this rising thing in me to explore something, but it's from a connected place. So that means that proper considerations are in place. When
Yeah.
I think of the concept of the sins now, I just look at it as, oh, that's where there's a lack of consideration across the board because we're not living that connection. And so what that reference to me is craving.
Yeah.
Craving is when we feel like something's missing, is empty, and we want to fill it. And that is what I watch some people use the word desire for, but I don't think it's placed properly. I think, and so that way there becomes a reference of, is this a craving? Is this me feeling empty and wanting a hit of gratification to get a hit of some sensation for fulfillment? That's not really fulfillment, right? Which is why it's just a gratification. Or is it, I feel full in me and feel the call in me to experience that which will enrich and develop and progress and advance my life. And so it's a different thing, because imagine if we recognized what attraction is, right? And that there's 7 main attractions, but you can experience attraction in misalignment as much as you can experience attraction in alignment. And just because you feel attraction to something doesn't mean you have to act on it,
Right.
right? Just because the cookie's in the cookie jar doesn't mean you got to fucking eat it. And so if we, and that goes back to what you talk about, being in command of it is cool, that's there, but because I'm full in myself, it becomes an option whether I would like to have the cookie or not. But
Yeah.
if it's not useful for me, then no. And then you go on about the day. And so the same thing applied. Wow, I find that person really attractive. That I am committed to being in this container. Amazing. I love witnessing the things I'm attracted to, and I know exactly where I'm committed to. Or I'm taking time for me, and though I could put some attention here, and there's a nice vibe, it's not the priority for where I'm at. Right? Like being that clear, that in command, because it's paramount. If we're not in command of ours, if we don't feel the connection, and we're not in command of our sexual essence, it's a shit show.
Yeah.
One way or another, either we're supremely disconnected, that then leads itself to a lot of distortions and perversions, or we're not in command and we're all over the place with it, and there's no command and center to it. Both of those are not only just rampant in our society, but are the recognitions of where we're being asked to scale back into a proper understanding of being connected and directing it properly, not being all over the place and not being shut down, right? We want the sweet spot of life to be in connection with it and command and harnessing. You know what I mean?
I
Yeah.
think from my experience personally and working with men is that one of the go-to places for soothing, for craving, is for intimacy or sexuality. And
Yeah.
obviously, in the world today, we have the other ingredient, which is porn, which is
Yeah.
some level of, self-regulation in some way that it's like, oh, I just can go to this, get a craving, get some
Yep. Get
soothing,
a hit.
change my
Yeah.
inner state through the chemistry that changes in my body while I do that practice.
Yep.
And ultimately, I think that looking at the relationship to sexuality is one of the most potent places for men to learn pattern recognition.
Yeah.
What are my patterns? What are my habits? And creating that as a skill to
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, I seem to have this pattern where I do this because talking about uh, coming from a state of wholeness or fullness when we go is a difference between desire and craving.
100%.
That takes an ability to be introspective and to witness oneself.
100%.
And I think men that are early in their journey of introspection, one of the greatest places to start is pattern recognition and just start to observe self as what seems to be my patterns. For me, it's like, okay, I seem to always want a snack late at night before bed. Okay,
Yeah.
practicing the ability to see myself. I seem to watch porn daily, could be a man's pattern recognition of himself. Simply for practicing the skill of observing ourselves,
Yeah.
because we need that as a foundation to be able to discern something like, am I going to this as a craving or as a desire?
Yeah.
Do I want to talk to this person? Do I want to go out tonight in hopes of meeting someone from a place of fullness or craving? That in order for me to have that ability, I've got to start somewhere to be able to witness myself. And it's so interesting because of the guilt piece and the resistance to looking at things. I think the relationship to sexuality is a great place to start with pattern recognition, but there is kind of that innate push away that is, don't look at that, don't see that, don't look over there.
Yeah, because and that's the fear, right? When that resistance is the fear. I'm afraid of looking at that because I struggle to feel and process this. I don't want I'm avoiding this pain point to look at myself because I noticed that we all have an idea of how we would like to live, and if we're not introspective enough, we'll think we could be living that, but then we get honest and we're like, oh shit, I'm not living it into that at all, or oh, I'm doing it here but not here, which is why introspection is so important, right? Self-reflection is so important, and for men it's paramount, especially because the masculine representing structure and a direction forward. If
Yeah.
we don't take time to look at ourselves honestly, we're not moving as soundly as we could. You know what I mean? And so I love what you talked about in pattern recognition because everything is about pattern recognition. It's literally how existence works. Is everything functions in patterns and systems and energetic sequence. And so being able to understand that and get to know oneself in that way, I think is huge. And exactly that, what happens at the end of the day when I'm by myself and I start to feel an itch. And because whenever I'm working with people, it's the same thing. Because I would notice that for me, if there was times I struggled to deal with loneliness, right? And I was sitting and I had moments to myself and I was being there, I'd feel an urge kick up to want to masturbate. And then it was like, cool, then I'm gonna put on porn and do that because then I don't have to be with myself if I'm doing that, right? And
Right.
and then I remember when it started to land for me, and especially during the time where I was like massively sexually active, right? And all the ways I was constantly wanting to have sex and feel that, and it was a self-esteem boost, and
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was an experience. But then underneath it, I wanted to feel greater connection with women, and it was an interesting space to be in myself. But I remember exploring the nature of masturbation and the difference between, I literally experimented with the difference between masturbating in my own accord or masturbating to porn. And it was wildly different experience where one was getting a great understanding and connection to myself and tuning into, and then one was just about like popping off and the stimulation off of this quick hit of something. And I felt one felt more energizing, one felt more depleting, one felt more deeper in connectivity, one felt like superficial, and you know what I mean. And so, and then and in breaking that down, it got very clear to me the notion of, because it came back to that notion of when I talk about everything being internal cause, external effect, right? What it means to live from the inside out.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I used to work at certain clubs. And I remember one time I saw uh, this porn they had on the screen at this one club I worked at years ago. And I remember it was one of the most artistic things I've ever seen. I go, wow, that's fucking beautiful. And I remember sitting there going, that's fucking beautiful. And it brought me back to that place of like, it feels like whoever recorded this is treating this as sacred. I wouldn't have had the language
Yeah,
then
yeah.
at the time for that,
Yeah.
but it was so clear when I reflect on that, and I go, because it can be as raunchy or as
Yeah.
sacred as you want it to be, and
Right.
it can, and we can hold that. But if we're not approaching it that way, if we're not living with that intention, if it's not how it's being offered, if it's not how it's being created, it's like everything else coming back to what's the intention. Is it aligned or misaligned? Is it considerate? Is it inconsiderate? Is it at the exploitation and taking advantage of others, or is it in the consideration of all? And I remember seeing that video and being like, amazing. And then it prompted me to recognize how beautiful it is to be able to acknowledge what we find sexually attractive, physically attractive, beautiful, but not have to turn it into anything, right? Or to make it a fantasy for me to stay in my own world and not live into the world and explore my own connection to women and to relationships. And these are the things, when we get more introspective, helps us come to not only greater connection to self, but gives us that honest look at, if I look at my patterns, am I actually living in a healthy way in connection to myself and out in the world relationally, or am I stifling my ability to do that? And if every time there's an opportunity for me to sit with myself in in aloneness or loneliness, and I go to porn, I'm creating a greater divide from my greater connection to myself.
Yeah.
And being able to tune into those moments, like you stated, with what is my pattern when if it's this time going to get a snack, or if it's this time, which is, and I feel you on that, because it's recognizing when I hit certain places and I feel a craving come up.
Yeah.
What is that craving coming up in relation to that I'm looking then to avoid with following that craving instead of be with? And
Yeah.
whenever I'm working with clients, I teach them the same thing I did with myself in those instances, which was sit in it, be with that energy before you act on it. And every time you do, the craving subsides, and what you're left with is whatever wants to be met in that moment. And it's where we strengthen the muscles to be more connected to ourselves, and then to show up more embodied in our lives, because the energetic access is available. But every time we go for something, whether it's food, whether it's a person, whether it's porn, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, whatever we use to not be with ourselves is the thing we're using to atrophy the muscles that would actually support us living into everything we desire to be.
Oh,
You know what I mean? And if we can introspect enough to catch when the sensation arises, because it'll tell us what's it's coming up to avoid, because we train ourselves to do that. It gives us a chance to break that pattern, lets our system know we're actually safe enough to be with this, so you don't have to turn on my craving mechanism now when this comes up. And now we strengthen our ability to be in command of ourselves and our lives, and that's part of the work. It's another form of a workout, because they're just muscles to flex,
mm,
you know. So,
mm.
but I love that you brought that in, because it's that thing. It's
And
wild.
I think this piece, as you were talking, I was just feeling the potency of the guilt piece.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a sting, or a thorn. It's just like, like this prick, because in all of this, it's easy for the mind to get lost in this is good, this is bad.
Yeah.
And for the most part, if it's like, if my habit is to do this with sexuality, that's bad, and I don't want to look at that, and so then it's just going to keep going on that way, because it's designed to be like, I'm not doing it right. I'm not good enough, and just like spiral into that quagmire that already exists, that was
Exactly.
most likely created early on. I
Yeah.
think about some of the experiences, it's like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 that these experiences are having for men, that can implant just the most powerful beliefs of there's something wrong with me, I'm not good enough, I'm broken, or whatever, that I think about the mind forming at that early age and taking on, even if the act was simply to see porn too early,
Yeah.
even if it was just seeing porn at 9, 10 years old,
100%.
where your
And not
mind
knowing how to make
cannot
sense of it. Yeah.
cannot comprehend what am I seeing,
100%. Yeah.
and this performative act,
Yep.
and whatever it stirs early on. So from so early in a man's mind in connection to sexuality is some feeling of confusion. I don't know what that is. I don't, something's wrong with me, whatever.
Hmm.
That's so familiar so as I'm saying this out loud, I'm realizing how heroic it is to go into that dark space and say, I want to look at this. I want to be a more powerful man. I want to be stronger. I want to reclaim these parts of myself. Man, talking about it now with you, I'm like, wow, that is courageous.
It's courageous, and it's necessary.
Yeah,
You know
totally.
what I mean? It's
Totally.
paramount, because that's, if we're willing to explore with that curiosity and introspection, it's what helps us gain greater understanding. And granted, it would be helpful to have leadership and mentorship that also helps offer that lens externally in reflection, that gives us a lens to explore more of ourselves. Because I think about that, like, we weren't, at least I wasn't, when I sat down and really talked about the understanding of sex and attraction and getting to a certain status, and women looking at me a certain way and approaching me, and the opportunities and these things. It wasn't as widely discussed. And so it was just navigating as I went. And then having whatever was because I remember as a kid, like, this is back in the day. I don't know if people remember this, but they had the Spice Channel, right? Like this, like the Spice, because the internet wasn't a thing fully yet. It wasn't all this stuff, no.
Totally.
And it was like we didn't get the channel, so it was like this little distorted, inverted neon screen and all this stuff. And I was like staring at it, and I'm like, oh, that's a titty, and it's like, oh, that's this. and I'm feeling these sensations in me. I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? What's happening in that sack? What's happening? I'm feeling things. What is this? Right? And it's fucking 1 a.m. Like no one's around here to tell me
Totally.
shit. I'm literally in this mode and having to like figure this shit out for myself initially. And I remember like it was fascinating taking a human sexuality class in college, having already had all kinds of experiences that I was just going through in myself, to then have that tutelage there and be like, oh yeah, that's that thing, and this is that thing, and then being able to have these conversations around it. It was fascinating, and so it was cool because that's what's necessary. Also, is if we're willing to explore ourselves introspectively and with that kind of mentality, rather than being like, I don't know what this is, but I'm just going to run with it, but actually exploring what is this, and creating spaces where we know it's actually okay to talk about these things, where it's not taboo, where it's not like, well, what do I do if I have these sexual, cravings come up, or sexual desire, and how do I know what's what? And people go, that's just the devil getting in you. You will shut that down, which only makes it worse, right? Like when the motto is just suppress it, everything gets fucking worse, right? It just exacerbates, and it gets built, and that's the issue with that. Pray it away. It's not how it works, right? Not how it works. We got to be able to understand how to sit with it, how to direct it. Like there's got to be the mechanisms of what's happening, because it's a real experience. And the more that we can dial into that, it helps that. And so that is the courageous act. Am I willing to take an honest look at these things? And especially if I develop some mentality and some belief that I'm wrong to have it, am I willing to actually excavate that and go, is it actually wrong? What does it mean for that to be wrong? And if it's wrong, why is it, what is this alive in me? And to be able to understand it from a physiological perspective, a mental perspective, an emotional perspective, and actually break it down that way, and a spiritual perspective, so that it's dialed into proper accordance, is always going to be the strongest way. And it's what we're going to be stepping more into. And when I think about it in terms of raising boys to men, it's an important rite of passage to understand your sexuality and to be able to command it, and what it means to know this energy and train the muscles to direct it early on, so it doesn't become something that later is just all over the place. You know what I mean? And so giving proper rites of passage to it too, and greater tutelage that doesn't come with the embarrassment and the discomfort and the shame of talking about something that is a part of life. You know what I mean? It's like, I think about this in everything. Like, I remember when I was a kid, I used to be self-conscious about pooping in public, and people,
Totally. Oh, me too.
People coming by the door and be like, oh, they're going to hear it. They're going to hear
too.
a loop in the toilet. And to the point where I had a babysitter once where like they would walk by the door, I would literally go, la, 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 because I was so uncomfortable with the idea of them knowing I was pooping. And it was like, why? Everybody on the planet does it.
Yeah.
Why is there shame around that?
Yeah.
And and so it's like being able to get honest about the things that are a part of our lived experience as just what it is. So then there's great understanding for it, and we just live our life and not create narratives of embarrassment or teasing or that stuff that adds to that. You know what I mean?
So there's a couple pieces, and I want to finish with I am the power. I want to go through them. I want to go through them because I love that one, and I connect it very strongly to the power of that energy center and its importance to be flowing with the rest of my body. And so you have, I'm going to list, so listeners will go into it later. It's a practice that Source Radiance does that I love. And then you also have the breath, when we draw and we're breathing in and we're drawing from the sexual center and bringing it up. So I'm curious what led you to creating both of these, and I'm sure you have more, that are this knowing of drawing and working with this sexual energy for our personal power. What was it that inspired you, or what was your aha moment that was like, man, this is a powerful energy center and it needs to be connected and flowing with everything else?
Yeah, as I was on my personal spiritual journey, before I was really teaching and sharing it, and I was accessing these things, I just kept bumping up against these wild inner conflicts between what was being asked of me, who I thought I was, and the type of experiences I wanted to have in the immediate. And being an athlete most of my life, and getting to a point where I would have greater visions or goals for my life, I understood the notion of discipline, right? What it means to show up and to dial in and to flex the muscles and to meet my edges and to face fears and to go for something, and what it means to stay consistent with it. And when what was interesting once I got out of college, because even in college, and from high school, college, and after it, right, highly sexually active, and even in that, before I was really embodying all this work and I was tapping into insights and having random experiences, but I didn't know it was going to be a practice yet. I didn't know it was going to be this thing I'm now teaching and representing and living an example of. And so even in that moment, I would notice when I started to reflect, I would take moments. I would just take moments during different times where I'd be like, cool, I'm just going to take the next couple months off. I'm not going to have sex with anybody. Just take a moment for me, right?
Yeah.
I would go get my tests and make sure I was clear and healthy, and I'll just be with me. It's like an energetic reset. It's just something unconsciously. It made sense to me intuitively to just do that, right? And then now I recognize the essence of fasting, like where I've been celibate now for a couple of years, just taking time to myself. I'm not interested in getting into a romantic relationship right now. I just want the space for me, and not even or pursuing sex or any of that. It's just being connected with me and with this energy and everything I'm building right now.
Yeah.
And it's a conscious decision. And what I recognized was I noticed with energy different things, right? Where I was up, I was down. I could sustain it this way and not. I experimented with sleep, right, where I wouldn't sleep at all for days, and then sleep these anything, just constantly exploring how energy works, and in a lot of unhealthy ways at first, right? It was like very unnecessary, and then I dialed it into more sound ways. But I was always interested in what's the difference between days I'm rocking energy and days I'm not, and then finding the sweet spot of what it meant to live in greater access to energy. And then the biggest word that started to come to me was sustain it. Can I increase? Because I can do something to spike my energy up, but can I keep that? And so the more I started to explore that, I started understanding more of this access. And if it's us, and I just started experimenting with different moves and different breath thing and ways that I could connect to that energy became part of my dedication. And also it was how quickly can I recover, which is how I got to a point now where I don't sleep as much, where it's, like on average, I sleep 4 hours a night, 5 hours is always max. And that's enough for me where I actually feel more energized, right? And being able to dial in these exercises, it was just that. It was a constant experimentation of, if I know life is lived from the inside out, that means energy is not coming from coffee. It's not coming from, this food thing. It's not coming from this thing. All of those things are the interaction with life, but I can experience those in different ways. And I started experimenting across the board. And so a lot of it came from my personal spiritual journey I was developing. And I had a couple of buddies of mine that we would like bounce things off of each other of like ideas, or we'd read a book on something and I was accessing, we'd explore, what is this? And I remember when I started to explore more of the energy, and I took this slice of pizza, right? And for 20 to 30 minutes, I just stared at this pizza. And I just locked in and I said, every bite of this pizza I eat, I'm going to feel more energy and more energy and more energy and more energy. And I just dialed it in. I focused on it until that was going to be the experience. And then I ate that slice of pizza. And bro, I was so lit of energy. I didn't even sleep that night. I was just sitting there being like, I got to do things, right? It was like, and I remember one of the first and only, well, I've only drank coffee a couple times. I'm not really a big fan of it. I love tea. But when I had the first time I had coffee, in the narrative of coffee supposed to give you energy, I remember I was sitting there like this, and the girl I was seeing at the time, she recorded her. I was just sitting here at the desk, and I was just like, right, in this narrative. And I go, well, why is that? Because then in the experiment, I ended up drinking coffee again and went to sleep like it was nothing. And I was like, cool. So it's not the coffee. What is happening? And that's what I really started to experientially understand how we're giving definitions to everything.
Yeah.
So I was like, cool. So if that's the case, and then that's where my motto came from, where it's like, well, then I am the coffee.
Yeah.
Then I am these things, right? That's why I would say that to people. It's like, you are that because it's there. So then that became the exploration. So then how do I tap into more of this energy from the inside out? And then I would fast for days and go, cool, if food's not the energy, then what happens if I fast? How do I draw on energy then? And start to tap into that. And then, cool, can I fast and not eat anything and live out my days and not pay attention to anything? Or can I fast and dial in energy? And I would notice the difference between when I'd fast and my muscles would atrophy, or when I fast and my muscle mass and body stay the exact same. Right? I was like, okay, so all of this is literally contingent on me. So then what's actually happening? And that's what led to tapping into that, like harnessing sexual energy, and then getting into acting really brought that home for me, because it was very evident that the more connected to my own sexuality I was, the stronger my performance was in my roles, because I could bring more of me to it. And I still to this day, a perfect example of this, I talk about when I teach all the time. We used to do these weekend workshops with this really, really fun, cool acting coach, Tom Todoroff. and he would have these weekend workshops. And one of the ones that I went to, we would always do a scene. You do a scene either by yourself or a scene partner, and he would, critique the performance and bring more of the truth of you out to deliver the performance. And one time we had this guy he was gay, and we could all tell he was gay, but he wasn't out yet, and we didn't know that, right? And so the performance was, he was supposed to be really suave and seduce this girl and this and that, but you can tell it wasn't carrying over.
Yeah.
And Tom's not he doesn't hold back. So he likes to push people to the edge, which I love him for. And after the performance, he just kind of let dude know, he was like, "You're gay, right?" And the guy was like, and had a moment with himself because he wasn't out, but we could all see it. And so then he has this emotional breakdown and gets this energy to move. And then we all get to like celebrate him and encourage him to be more of himself, right? Own that. And just that moment of liberation for him to own the fact that he was gay. Then they went and did the performance again. Fucking stellar, bro. Like, it was so suave and so Don Juan. And even the girl was like, yo, I'm feeling the experience of it, right? Just because he was connected to his sexuality, he wasn't stifling it in our presence anymore.
Yeah.
Right? It's that powerful. So when I think about these experiences and I think about what it means for us to be connected, that's what prompted me to want to build mechanics to help people access it and get there. And I would just start exploring things that work for me and ways I can start to give it to people to have a practical application of that access. You know what I mean? And so it was from a lot of experiences and the constant exploration of and excavating of what is happening with different things that led to that. Yeah.
I could talk to you about this all day, I'm sure.
No.
We're getting close to the end
Sure.
here.
Yeah.
There's two pieces that are really standing out to me, which is it takes courage. And you said it's needed. That's necessary.
Yeah.
Necessary. And it takes courage and it's necessary. I want to end going through the power, but I want to give space for anything to encourage a man to face that fear, to meet that necessary journey, meet that necessary cave.
Yeah, man. Look, I always tell people we don't not do things based on fear. We don't do things based on our lack of awareness of how to meet the fear. And so for all the men listening, my invitation to you is when fear arises, it is a signal of what to face to step more into your liberation. Right? It is key to accessing the more, because whatever we're afraid to feel is exactly what's necessary to feel to move forward in greater capacity. And you may have to say that to yourself a few more times before it really dials in. And if you just give yourself the chance to flex the muscles of facing your fears, you'll step more into everything you're designed to be. And it's not an excuse not to do it. Also, it doesn't matter if it's easy or hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes it may feel harder than others. It's still necessary. You know what I mean? So it's the invitation is be willing to do it because you're always going to be better off. I've never met a single human in my life that faced a fear and turned out worse. You know what I mean? Like it's just, and when we're in it, we're in it. The narratives in our mind, it'll all feel true and you'll have a moment to be like, nah, but if you're just have the courage, keep having the courage a little bit more every day, keep meeting it, and you're going to end up in a more liberated, authentically embodied state. And it's always worth it. It's always worth the price of admission. You know what I mean?
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to put your details in the description. So anyone interested in Kevin's stuff, I'll put his Instagram. I'll put any of the things that he wants to put in there for the offerings. And let's just go out. Thank you so much for coming on here today. There's so much goodness and I had epiphanies. So I'd love if you could just give them a little talk through of like the different places of the body they can put their attention as they're saying each of these, and then like go out with it.
Yeah, let's go. So this is tuned into one of our activational expressions about owning the power that we are. And then you speak it in each energy concentration, right? In our central energy system. So you're dialed into the different ways we live with, access, and put to use this power that we are. Right, so think of it as just like the central energy system, which is what is most widely known as chakras. I like to call it the energy system because creatorhood, right? So I teach, and that's really what it is, just a concentrated source of energy. And so we're going to speak life into it from the root, right, to the sacral. So the root is between the genitals and the anus, between the tailbone and the pubic bone, in that centralized area. That's the root part. That's the I am the power that we're going to speak to. Then you're going to move up attention and go up the spine with it, and it's right above the genitals, below the navel, right, and right into that space right around the lower back. In that centralized space, I feel the power in that sacral. Then we go up to that solar plexus, right, just below the chest plate, and right in the middle of the back, in that centralized space where we take action with it, and that's I move in power, right? Then moving up to the heart center that wants to live in the greater embrace of life, wanting to be in the full acceptance, remembering that heart connectivity is holding the energetics from the temporal and non-temporal, the spiritual and material, so it lives in that centralized acceptance. So then that's that I love in power. Move up to the throat, right? The fifth concentration, I speak the power, right? So if you're accessing, you're tuned in, and also this is part of the communication that tends to listening. But in order for you to tune into these ones, you're listening to be able to speak life into it. So that's I speak the power. Then we get to the first eye, and it's the first eye. People call it the third eye because we use the reference point of our physical reality, but our reference point is actually the multidimensionality of us. The physical eyes came after the first eye. So the first eye is I see the power, right? And then we get to the crown, which is the recognition of the knowing and the understanding. I know the power. And then we hold the greater acknowledgement of what has endowed us with the power from source, because we didn't just conjure this up ourselves, we were gifted it. And that is, I am blessed in power, right? And so we speak life into that all the way up. So that's what we're going to do in this moment. All right. All right. So tune into that first concentration, and then we're just going to keep moving up the line, and you just let yourself speak it when you hear these words. I am the power. I feel the power. I move in power. I love in power. I speak the power. I see the power. I know the power. I am blessed in power. Yeah. Speak
Thank you
life in that
so
every
much.
day.
Thank
Yeah,
you
for
so
sure.
much, Kevin.
Honor, brother.
Enjoy, man. Keep that one. Play it over and over. I've been doing it in my day-to-day life. You are the power.
Oh,
Thank you so much, Kevin, and
honor.
take care, listeners.
Yeah, thank you all.